So the biggest breakthrough that you're probably going to get in this video, if you endure the full-length version, and it's going to get a little slow. There's going to be some really slow stuff at the end. I'm going to read some gospel of truth, and I don't read it fast. I don't just read right through it. I sit in the silence and really contemplate what I'm looking at. So I take you kind of through that. But here's the deal. Resting to receive. That's what you should be thinking about this whole time through. In terms of this, if I told you that the secret to having what God has already given you, which is the full blessing, is resting to receive, in other words, rest in peace, like the app that I made. Here's the idea. What do you think that means? Well, it means to withdraw all of your human consciousness. That's what it means. Withdraw all of your human consciousness. Okay, so I'm going to talk a lot about that and take you through the whole process in this video and give you an actionable step to take that will help you practice this. So here's an example of how I used the new deck, okay? So I pulled out this spread this morning, and this one is from the Zen Tarot. It's called the Key spread. And I looked at it, and then I went on my walk, and I just allowed the revelation to come through me on the walk. And so you'll get to see that part next. But I started my morning in the meditative prayer of contemplating the allness of God through these keys. And so let me take you through this quick. And then I want you to look between the lines, if you will, on my walk with me, if you're going to stick around, and find how these cards really opened my consciousness to discern what you'll be learning in that video coming up here. Now, at the end, I'll give you an assignment and tell you what you can do to bring about this revelation and the transformation that I'm discussing. And ultimately, if you watch the whole thing, you'll get the entire message. There's going to be some judgment going on. I'm going to be making judgments. But what I'm doing is I'm demonstrating what's going on inside of me. Okay? So just look at it from that frame of reference. Now, this is what's suppressed. Since God created all living substance and declared it was good, you've already been judged. That judgment stands firm forever. That's my daughter, by the way. I'm just going to show you. She is doing some rollerblading this morning. You want to say hi, Fiona?
Hi.
Show them how you rollerblade quick before I get started. So I picked her up some rollerblades in Florida, and she just loves it. And she's really good. She is very, very good on these skates. All right. Anyway, well, let me take you and show you outside. Then we'll go to the spread. Now, this is beautiful. It's a lot nicer now than it was when I went on my walk. It looks like it's warming up quite a bit. So, anyway, I'll take you out there for the walk in just a moment. I'm doing this like a Pulp Fiction movie. I've already made the walk, and I've already done the spread. So now I just want to show you what happened, how it opens it up. So here's what is the allowing or the receiving side, and this is the masculine action side. So, feminine, I am of the pure mind of God, no other mind exists. Masculine, spiritual sense is the perceiving of a divine principle from the position of having been restored, saved by grace, as the image and likeness or attribute of divine principle in its eternal and completed works. Here's the meditation. God's law of immediate harmony sets in the moment you recognize two facts. The lawless one in the perception of the natural man, as witnessed by the five human senses, implies it is without law. It's powerless.
Love these skates.
She loves these skates. Second, recognize that God alone governs all creation. You're going to see that in my transmission, how this is worked out. I'm going to show you how I worked it out in my own thought, and I'll give you an exercise to do the same, and you'll love it. Here's the insight into the body. I am the resurrection and the life. Nothing else exists. Here's the insight into the heart. God never created mortals. Since your sense of sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing constitute your recorded history, relying on this evidence is the source of all fear and confusion. You must lay down this false sense of life to gain your life. You can return to your true state and receive your spiritual inheritance at will. No time has passed, no mistakes were made, neither hath this man sinned nor his parents. Here's insight into the beingness. Material evidence does not touch, interfere, obstruct, or in any way infringe upon a spiritual idea. You are a spiritual idea in the mind of God. It is well with thee. Declare this in your heart, and here's the key. Discern the immediate blessing in this moment, and you will have joy as your companion. Now, here's the idea. At the end of the video you're about to see, after I work out this judgment going on in my thought, okay, it's going to be about a man I saw and how I work this out, and then what I do to transmutate the nothingness of material evidence into its spiritual counterpart, which is truth. And then by doing that, you do discern the immediate blessing in this moment and have joy as your companion. Not to mention, I'm going to do a couple sets, and I'm going to do the safe touch and some ABC big process, and I'm going to get my day started and get a bunch accomplished. So don't forget that, and I'll see you in the video.
Hola, ¿cómo está? So, yeah, I got some real incredible news for you today. So I, did some reflection this last couple days, and I realized that, while I was, watching, CNN on the screen at the gym, and I was, reading the newspaper and talking to people out in public, about all the world events, I decided that I just really should just give up ministering, because I like fitting in with everybody so much. I want to be part of the mainstream collective. So regretfully, I'm here to tell you that, from now on, I'll be piggybacking all of the information that you see on both sides of the coin. I'll be talking about world events, and then I'll also be revealing the truth about all the world events, kind of on both sides of the fence. So I'll try to pick up all of the people that I possibly can, because I really want to fit in, and I want to have lots and lots of attention, and I want a lot of people to really listen to me. So yeah, I think I'm going to give up the talk about God being all and all that nonsense that I've been sputtering about for years and years. So yeah, no, I'm just kidding. That's April Fool's. Of course I'm not going to do that. It is tough, isn't it, though? I mean, when you walk into the wisdom of this knowledge and recognize that very few actually want to hear it, let alone believe it. It's really tough to believe, because it's not what you're seeing, it's not what you're feeling, it's not what you're hearing. And yet it's not a Pollyanna feel-good approach. It's not something that you're just hoping for the afterlife. It's not that at all. What we're actually doing here is we are bringing light to the deficiency. This is happening, as they say. This is really happening. I mean, this whole area, it's amazing. The biggest startling aha moment I had was, I walked through this whole area all year during the whole lockdown of 2020 and most of 2021 as well, and I still continue to do it this day, and I hold the truth, knowing that, God's man is never deceived. God's man only knows what God knows, and the only truth is that which God bestows, and I live in that truth. And I just hold these simple ideas in my thought awareness, walking through this, this city here. And I got to be honest, the energy here was better than all the energy everywhere I went on this trip, all the way from, Sheboygan all the way to Florida. And even when I got to Florida, yeah, there were a lot of people there. There was a lot going on. The energy was pretty good. I'd say it was pretty good. But it was better here. It's amazing. It's amazing what one individualized consciousness of truth can do. It's amazing what power God has over all creation when you just recognize that that is all the power there is. And this is for your individual life experience, not just me telling you this. I can't tell you to do anything. I can't do your life for you. You know, maybe this year I should start praying about the weather in the winter or something. It is cold. It really is. And I'm, totally over this winter stuff. It's just totally over it. And isn't it ironic that they talk about the winter being the barren place of good in the Nag Hammadi library? It's the outer world. It's winter. What does it feel like in winter? Just cold. It just feels barren of good. Absolutely. It hurts to go outside. Everything dies. That's the real key, is everything dies in the winter season. So you walk through the valley of the shadow of death as the individualized consciousness of Christ. The I am self, the presence of the I am. Completely undisturbed. You've already overcome the world. You've already covered all of creation with the fullness of the pleroma, the Holy Spirit, governing all creation. It says the Holy Spirit even governs those rulers that bound and enslaved their captives for eons. So even the so-called evil forces serve the good. So that's where I come full circle now, and I tell you that this is not just a Pollyanna thing. This is really a revelation leading to inspiration and then finally transformation. It's like the writ in law, a writ, the writ of habeas corpus. Well, this is the revelation, inspiration, transformation, the RIT. Well, the deal is even the error or the evil will serve you when you subdue it with the consciousness of pure awareness itself. Being of one mind, one power, having only one God. So again, I will continue to talk about these ideas on this walk and talk today. And you really can't hear it enough. The idea here is that you fall asleep in the dream repeatedly, again and again and again, until you reach a certain level of discernment where you have overcome the vast majority of fear within your own self-preservation, your attitude of self-preservation. It's kind of like you go from this stage of being completely supported and loved as you come out of that birth canal. You're of the pure innocence still. But then as the idiot adults around you, idiocracy, the matrix of idiocracy, they adulterate you in the knowledge of good and evil, the ways of this world. And then the serpent, that is the serpent mind itself, operating through the sleep dream of the carnal, fictional characters in that realm that you hear, smell, see, taste, and touch. They lead you off astray into the wilderness into the opinions of this world, away from one mind and one principle of divine love. And before you know it, you're nothing but a thinking, calculating, scheming, self-preserving vessel in a sea of maritime war, in a shipping war. And that's what they call being an adult. And that's what they call being responsible, prudent. And so somewhere along the way, you begin to question things because, ultimately things don't add up, Things really just don't make sense anymore. And you recognize that everything is upside down, the doctors, they're such great heroes, and all of a sudden that's the number, number 1, 2, or 3 killer of all humanity with their prescription medications, right? I mean, then you start to see things that you've never noticed before. Well, the doctors are destroying all the health. Then you see the lawyers are really just British accredited registry. They're foot servants of the soldier to the Queen of England. They're really British agents, and they're handing you over to the private association called the bar, and they're both working on the same side to fleece you. And you start to realize, okay, this whole thing is a scam. The whole world is a scam. It actually runs on the password of cheaters. Just say the word cheaters. Say it 3 times, like Beetlejuice. Say cheaters, cheaters, cheaters. Say the password to the Matrix and watch what happens. Watch all of the fraudulent cheaters in your life get exposed. I had a guy teach me that years ago. He was an alchemist out of South Africa. And he came highly recommended. And he's, basically, he's like, Matthew, I tell you this. You say the password cheaters. Watch what happens. Those around you cheating you will be exposed. I said, okay, fair enough. Yeah, see how that goes for you. Well, the whole matrix runs on corruption. The whole thing is corrupt. So the more corrupt you are, the higher you get in terms of, academia and all these other. The irony of it, the educated ones, they're the most corrupt of all. Because they've squeezed every ounce of the unknown, which comes from the impossible, which is the only thing possible when you live in the Spirit. Man plans and God laughs. I mean, there you go. There you have it. Man in his best day is nothing but vanity. Man of the earth is just a creature of dust, ignorance, superstition, of materialism, looking under its own microscope at its own ignorance. Oh, look, there's all these cells, and there's all these muscles and vessels and blood, blah, 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 blah. It's like, none of that stuff's real. None of it exists. All the mystics that have ever allegedly walked the earth and made themselves visible in the carnal reality, they don't operate from that construct. That construct was dead from the beginning. If you were dead from the beginning, you shall never taste life. So life is not with mortality. And yet the whole academia runs under the law of flesh, which is mortality. And yet mortality is what everybody's trying to escape through their Botox or their, supplements or even the fitness regimens. Everybody's trying to escape mortality. And yet what a paradox, because everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die to get there now. See, the whole thing is corrupt. Look at every doctor on TV. They're going to tell you about this great discovery they found that's going to increase your lifespan. And yet there's like 4,500 side effects that come along with every single one of them. Do you really think that harmony, which exists at every point of the universe of God's creation, distorts itself into disharmony at some point because of some sort of intelligence that came into the equation? Or is that actually a lack of intelligence masquerading itself as wisdom? You see, it's really the lamp not really burning too bright at the end of the day. And that's why Jesus said that the wisest among them were empty-headed. Nothing has changed. The world is idiocracy at its finest day. And yet it's also perfect at the same time. What a contrast. Because the Holy Spirit governs all and leads all for God's purposes. And so there really is order in chaos, and there really is a method to the madness. And once you get to that place, you see, once you move past the whole truth movement, that's just the other side of the same coin. Once you move past all of that knowledge, you move into surrender. Surrendering of yourself. You lay down your life to gain your life. You recognize that you're not even here. And by the removal, the proper removal of you, is how you defeat the enemy. There you go. There's the biggest secret you've ever heard in your life. You look around you at a world conspiring in every way to rob, steal, and kill. Everywhere you look through the mortal lens of human life experience, there are those trying to fleece you. There are those trying to kill you. There are those betraying you. I mean, you're screwed every which way you look. You're just absolutely screwed. No wonder there's 3 out of 5 people at every moment looking to get high on something and drugged out on one thing or the other. Because they recognize the impossibility of living in this dysfunctional, dystopian, upside-down, anti-civilization. There is no hope and glory to be achieved anywhere, because once you get there, you recognize that it's empty. I was there in 2013. I achieved, the 7-figure status out of nowhere. Had the mansion, the 8,500 square foot mansion, the sports cars. All the things that I thought would make me, complete. Now I'm complete. Look at me. No, I wasn't happy. I didn't have anything. I had nothing. It was all a facade. It's just an illusion. It might make you comfortable for a season. But ultimately, it's not it. And yet it's also neither good nor bad. So, not to be condemning those who have those things, because there's nothing good or bad about it. Luxury can be a wonderful thing. And yet it can also be a wonderful thing to have no luxury. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the surrender that you have to make. That's the removal of you and all the judgments. When you let God alone be the allness of His creation. You see, healing is revealing God's allness in the midst of His creation. It really is the removal of you and every person and all qualities and conditions where you ascribed power to them must be retracted and all power given back to the one, the still presence that is the immutable, eternal I am, that knows no other life, no other power, no other intelligence, and no other creation. And at last, as you step into that consciousness, at first it'll be some fleeting moments of like a new dawn. It feels like a new day just sprung up on you out of nowhere. when that consciousness comes, it frees you from all of the striving and want, which means lack. And it rescues you in your time of need by bringing the Comforter to you, the Prince of Peace, the living Christ, meets you in human thought and produces whatever is needed. Because wherever the Christ is, all sufficiency must also be present. Because that is the nature of the Christ. It's the all-sufficiency of good that bears the Father's fruit. And there's nothing else that exists. So as you turn away from the world of the dead, the father of lies, the parent mind of evil, which is the reasoning, rational, human insanity, and you return what belongs to God, all power, all qualities, and all life. You can reemerge as the image and likeness of that one living substance and be wholly governed by that substance, back to the pure blamelessness, the innocence, if you will, before eating of the tree of good and evil. Nothing is good and nothing is evil as it appears to you in the material construct. Okay. Just had to queue up again. Yeah. So I myself, I'm going to turn the scrutiny to myself here. I'm working on love in terms of acceptance of things that used to really trigger me and bother me. And now I'm really just becoming more neutral in this environment. The example is the other day I was at the grocery store and I could hear this guy, he's checking out right next to me, and he's got his, his suit on, his nice clothes, and he's talking all about how it's so important for such and such person to be part of honor society, and he's just going on, and it's this big, like, this, it really just reeked of an air of, it made him look important, like he's an important person. He's an important man in society, and everything has to reflect that his importance has to be known everywhere he goes. And yet he's like 40 or 50 pounds overweight. And ultimately, I'm not going to judge, because everybody's going through their own trials and struggles. This is a tough place. No matter which way you slice it, this is a tough place. But the only judgment that comes in with me is I keep thinking in my awareness, wouldn't you make the high priority to know the ultimate truth so that you could escape all of that? Wouldn't you want to escape the approval seeking of colleagues and peers and be ultimately liberated beyond all of that false sense of esteem that comes from the world itself? It really is of no importance. Hi there. I mean, it is vanity, and vanity has some benefit. I suppose it keeps you out of the gutter. You know, it keeps you out of being homeless. It keeps you out of other conditions like that. But I remember people growing up that were like that, and I remember how important it was to be so valued by your peers and colleagues for your contributions to their institutions of merit and receiving accolades from the finest places. Sure, that's fine. But ultimately, it becomes an idol. It becomes something that stands in the way of the humility. Oops. It's the humility you need. You see, you've got to carry all that stuff with humility. You've got to carry all of your badge of honor with a sense of humility. Otherwise, you can't have the kingdom. And the goal of goals is to have the kingdom. That's where I'm going with this. You know, I used to have to face that with, having a great physique and training and all these things that I thought were really important. Even manifesting lots of success with the internet marketing and all the things that have come along that I've done. When I lost my sense of humility, it seems like shortly after, the balance of that whole equation began to force me into the loss of other things as well. Everything is seeking rest and stillness and balance. And so when we make something so important to us, obviously this gentleman on the phone was making this a very important deal. I could hear by the tone of his voice that he was a little concerned and upset about some missing the mark with this honor society thing, and it was very valuable to him, I'm sure, to be perceived as someone who is responsible. Look at what I've done for this child. I've made him such a success in the world. Great. Well, what about that 50 pounds around your waistline? You see, we always want to look at others and want to say, look what I've done. Look what I've done. And the sense of humility is that, hey, look what God's given me. Not look what I've done. That's really what we got to do. Look what God is doing, not look what I've done. Whenever we say look what I've done, look what our family name has accomplished, anything like that, whenever we start to talk like that, you go into the dream of lack and want, and it brings more strife. And that's one of the aphorisms in my deck, is that the seeking of pleasure in this world leads to more pain, and the proof is the strife that it brings. And you see, it's obvious. I mean, the seeking of pleasure for this guy in his worldly success has led him to not really being the reflection of well-being. So what it does is it throws the balance of the universe off at some capacity. Because we make it so important and then we take credit for it. That's where the problem comes in, is we overstep our boundaries and we become void of humility. So that's where my judgment comes in as a minister, as I just want to say, humble yourself. Humble yourself a bit. So what? So what? You're successful. You got a great family name. Who cares? I'll tell you what I want to tell you. You can laugh at the world. It's an acronym, LAF. You can recognize that love, followed by inspired action through faith, LAF. Love followed by inspired action through faith, by planting the seeds of good. I suppose good's a good word for that. Just planting the seeds of good in the world. One good deed done for someone else has more wisdom in it than 8 years of graduate school. Humanity is all doing one thing wrong, according to what God knows they're trying to seek for themselves. I want a bigger house. I want a better family name. I want more prestige. I want more esteem. I want. And that's what throws the balance of the universe off. When you understand the twin dielectric poles are always seeking balance and rest, and that God's already poured out the whole blessing, we're already all children of the Most High, already bestowed with all good that was ever given, already ours to receive and to claim, you recognize that you can have all of those things because you already do have those things. And that the true desires of your heart will always come into your life through the still attitude of humility that lives in service to others. That's really what I'm trying to say. And so essentially, when you see what wisdom could bring to the equation, when I look at someone like this guy, I could say, you know, I bet you would reflect qualities of youth and vitality and the wellspring or the step of health and vigor would come into your life in conjunction with every other good thing that's been bestowed upon you. If you didn't put such importance in this area and yet you focused on laughing at the whole situation, laughing at the situation itself, that man can get anything. That's the big idea. Trying to get for ourselves. The whole law of attraction industry, you know, so many people come and go throughout the years. And the reason why is because it's all just, it's a moronic point of view. Because it's based on the idea that there's a law that I can get all these things. And all I have to do is, just do a couple rituals and I can get. When the opposite is true, when man thinks he's giving, he's receiving. It's the opposite. What comes through you sticks to you. Love with inspired action through faith. Laugh at the whole thing. Whenever you sense lack, laugh at it. Whenever you sense lack, you're throwing the universe out of balance through human will. You've made a false god. That's what I'm trying to say. See, I can see these things through the eyes of wisdom. I can see where the balance is thrown off. Because it always distorts some other quality or reflection of God within the whole image. Okay? So when I see a so-called successful person, and yet they're, overweight and kind of not really springing forth in vital well-being, I can say, well, you just squirted out the side effects of human reasoning in another area of your life. That's not the reflection of God. God wants you to have all of the qualities of God. And so how did that happen? Well, it was the overstepping of humility and the self-seeking, self-preserving attitude of I want, I lack. I mean, they call it little man syndrome in a lot of other areas, but it really has to do with a sense of somewhere in my life I perceived an absence of love. And this is where compassion comes in. Okay, compassion is required to see love, to see what love is doing. So somewhere in my life I perceived an absence of love. Maybe his father didn't love him because he didn't, have honor society himself at one point. So now he's created this family tradition of being, a hard-nosed, let's drive our kids to perform, or else, that kind of behavior, right? You have to see what's causing it. Alright, so I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm just going to go with where I want to go with this thing, because this is where we have to go with this, okay? So, that man that I saw represents me. Just so you know, that represents something in me, showing itself to me. Everything that we see, that we judge, is us. So it now comes full circle. I'm not judging a man out there. All are within thought. We must change our thought about the persons, conditions, qualities, and circumstances within our thought. And so as I look through the eyes of wisdom at this seeming person, at something that I wanted to judge, I was judging myself. What is it that I'm learning about myself? So the first thing I know is that right where there is a claim that there is this personality, okay, start with the personality itself. There is only one person, one living Christ, one mind, one activity, governing itself perfectly in harmonious expression. So I remove the person out of the equation. I recognize that the nothingness of the personality that is out of balance implies that it is nothing. It's an illusion. Now, lastly, I discern the fact that this is within my thought. It's not out there in the world. And so as I go into my thought and I remove all qualities, conditions, and power from anything out there, and I give it all back to Spirit within, and I allow Spirit within to govern its creation wholly and entirely by identifying the nothingness of everything out there. Okay, now you got to stay with me here. This is a little confusing if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm consuming matter within myself. So I'll recap for you so you can see exactly what I just did. Here I was, allegedly, in a place, in a grocery store. Here I saw, allegedly, another person talking, conveying their disapproval of some achievement or some level not achieved. Here I witnessed a judgment being made within my own self, saying this guy is an a-hole and he expects a lot out of other people, and who is he to think much of other people when he's got a pot belly and he's not even in good health? Now, that's my problem. That's not anyone else's problem. So I'm going to see the nothingness of the problem itself in my thought, and that's how I set free and that's what you call a healing. So here's how this works. Right where there appeared to be a person, there was nothing but the allness of God. Okay? Right where I appeared to have witnessed disharmony, it was going on within my thought, awareness. It wasn't happening out there. Right where I appeared to be, in a place, there was nothing there but the mind of God. The mind of God can only observe its own ideas. So goodness, harmony, love, joy were the only things happening in that space. Now, do you see how I just destroyed the whole illusion that I ever was at a time or place, and I ever witnessed anything outside of myself occurring? There is no world out there. There was no other person. There's only the beliefs that have been held in carnal thought that I must disengage with, identify as nothingness of its own impersonal nature by removing the persons from it, and then reasserting the truth of beingness itself, the unchanging, infallible nature of spirit. And this is really how you make mountains move. It's not your power, it's God's power. You don't have any power to do any of this. I just took what was seemingly out there. I brought it back within to the centripetal 0 point of ultimate truth is divine love. And I just fed it wisdom and destroyed the error. And that's all I have to do. And you can do this everywhere you are. And you are actually doing all that you are required to do ever. And that's to see only one cause, one life, one principle, and one power. Nothing else is required of you. And then you will recognize that you are in the fullness of the blessing, because it will begin to serve you. And you can only do this by doing it. So go out and try this and watch what happens.
Let's just go with a little study from the Valentinian literature, The Gospel of Truth. Again, this is one of my favorites of all time. And I refer back to it all the time, in the same way that I'd refer back to the RIP deck or any of the Psalms that I like. Okay. I just want to go through some key ideas. And if you're still with me, then great, we'll do this together. The Gospel of Truth begins with a Jewish Christian enunciation of joy in the good news of the gospel, which brings hope to those who would seek the Father. So it's an enunciation of joy in the good news of the gospel. Well, if the gospel is good news and joy seems to be this prevalent theme, okay, that comes and goes throughout this literature, I think it would be important to maybe do exactly what I did just about 10 minutes ago. And I measured my level of joy inside of myself from 0 to 10. And I did a few sets, self-entrainment technique, and I did that to get my joy to like an 8 right now. What I've discovered is that when your joy is an 8 or above out of 0 to 10 scale, you really are open to receiving the gospel of good news, okay? And if you are not in a state of joy, which means a reflection of the Father, at least at an 8 or above, then you will reject the gospel of good news. Think about that really closely, okay? Receiving or rejecting from God, from good. Which one do you prefer? Out of the heart come the issues of life. The self-entrainment technique is the most powerful way that I have ever seen, ever done, And this is throughout many, 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 many years of searching every single day. I recommend using it. If you don't know it, you go get my book, Trust, the Most Powerful Force in the Universe. You get that on Amazon. It gives you the free course. You take the course, the video course that accompanies it. You watch me teach you the self-entrainment technique. You do the self-entrainment technique, and you will prosper. That book will show you how to tune yourself to receive the gospel of good news. Okay? Let's go on. So it says here, somehow, from the very realm of the good Father, error comes. Herein lies the mystery for Gnostics of the goodness of the divine and the reality of evil in the world. Now, I have my own interpretation of this, okay? So if you go and you look into the mirror and you see what carnal mind sees, which is a flesh-bound figure, this is the fallen state of human perception. When you walk and you see the sunlight cast a shadow, and your shadow is appearing to move through time and space, the shadow doesn't move on its own. The shadow moves according to the principle of the one, okay? The one and the zero is the number for God, okay? It's telling you here that from the realm of the good Father, error comes. The good Father is the one, okay? One. Error comes is the zero. So you have the principle of one, and then you have the, right here, the zero is the infinitude, the error of nothingness. Zero means nothing, okay? And what is that? It's the shadow world. So what does man see when man looks in the mirror? The reflection of belief. Okay, the belief, human belief, creates a fashion-form figure of a material body. That human belief is impersonal. So, as you can see, if we take the personalization out of it, in other words, if you get rid of you, then the allness of the Father is the only thing left. So the one is the allness of the Father, and the zero is when you are in the equation somehow, taking thought for your own life as if you had one. What happens when you multiply anything into zero? It becomes zero. Are you not multiplying your life experiences through the lens of the personalization of yourself? That's a zero. If you return all power to the one, the Father, give all power and all qualities back to the Father, then you will be in the knowledge of the Father through the gnosis that comes from returning what belongs to the one self. So let's go into this. I'm just going to point out a couple key ideas. One finds God in oneself, then the fog of error and terror is gone, and the nightmare of darkness is exchanged for an eternal heavenly day. So one finds God in oneself. So again, just picture the number one. One finds God in oneself. So the one is always observing what the one is. So there is no room for any of the zero. That's the fog of error and terror. Moving portrait of the Son, of whom the Father is not jealous, and who utters no threat of gnashing teeth or hell and brimstone to fellow Jews who do not accept that he is the Messiah. In addition to being a quiet guide of sheep gone astray, the implied Jesus also teaches a portrait of the Father's face. We soon realize that the Father, not the Son, is the center of the sermon. And he is personified and endowed with utter sweetness. Okay, now, the Father and not the Son. Okay, again, Jesus was able to remove all of his cares, wants, and concerns for self-preservation. That's the secret. Until the moment when they who are passing through all these things awaken, they see nothing because the dreams were nothing. See, the world is nothing. It is thus that they who cast ignorance from them like sleep do not consider it to be anything, nor regard its properties to be something real, but they renounce them like a dream in the night. And they consider the knowledge of the Father to be the dawn. It is thus that each has acted as if asleep during the time of ignorance, and thus a person comes to understand as if awakening. And happy is one who comes to himself and awakens. Indeed, blessings on one who has opened the eyes of the blind. God's will is good. Unity of the perfect thought may prevail. So here we go. Joy is the gospel. Remember what I said about joy? You should do sets until you're an 8 or above in joy every day. It's when you don't do these sets and you don't stay at joy, you can't receive the gospel of good. It's right in your face, staring at you. Once you know, you can never unknow the truth. If you've been listening to me for the last few years, you know the truth. But you'll reject it if you're not in a state of reflecting the Father's joy. It says the gospel of truth is joy. You could also say joy is the gospel of truth. Okay, now it says who is in the thought and mind of the Father. You live in the thought and mind of the Father, the One. You're a spiritual idea. Now it says all was inside of him, the illimitable, inconceivable one who is better than every thought. So error is impossible. So ignorance of the Father brought about terror and fear, and terror became dense like a fog, so no one was able to see. Because of this, error became strong, but she worked on her material substance vainly because she did not know the truth. She assumed a fashion figure while she was preparing in power and in beauty the substitute for truth. So error assumed a fashion figure. That's your material life. Your body is this error, and your extended body is the world of material form that you see, smell, hear, taste, and touch. That's the she. Okay, the counterfeit of the Holy Ghost, of this Holy Spirit, is the womb of material creation. She assumed a fashion figure. The entire world clothes itself as the clone substitute for truth. It's a substitute. It's counterfeit. This then was not a humiliation for that illimitable, inconceivable one, for they were as nothing. This terror, this forgetfulness, this figure of falsehood. It's telling you everything out there is nothing. Whereas established truth is unchanging, unperturbed, and completely beautiful. Spiritual awareness, true life. For this reason, do not take error too seriously. Since error had no root, she was in a fog regarding the Father. She was preparing works in forgetfulness and fears in order by these means to beguile those of the middle, that's human sense perception, the middle place, middle kingdom, reasoning, and make them captive. Forgetfulness might be destroyed, and that the Father might be known, since forgetfulness existed because the Father was not known. If the Father comes to be known, from that moment on, forgetfulness will cease to exist. Well, it's exactly what I did with the idea with perceiving that man and the, qualities that I was judging as being out of alignment with God's harmony. So what did I do? Well, that was all forgetfulness. Come to know the Father, and from that moment on, forgetfulness will cease to exist. So here's what happens, though. When you discover the Christ within you, error becomes angry with you and persecutes you. She was distressed by him, and she was made powerless. He was nailed to a tree. He became a fruit of knowledge of the Father. He did not destroy them because they ate of it. He rather caused those who ate of it to become joyful because of this discovery. Okay, he is the one who set all in order. Okay, that's God. Created everything in order. Whom all existed and whom all lacked. He wants them to know him and love him. Jesus became a guide, quiet and at leisure. In the middle of a school, he came and spoke the word as a teacher. Okay, so in whom every space has its source. The Father calling those who have knowledge. The Father's Son is Jesus of utmost sweetness. His joy agrees with it. Rest in peace, receives it. Trust, embraces it. So I take a lot of these and I really teach you the activity of doing this. This is really an activity sheet right here. So his wisdom contemplates the word. Okay, wisdom. What do you know about wisdom? Wisdom is the tongue of the Father. Wisdom finds those who are qualified because of their desire to seek it. So this is the desire to want wisdom, to want to know the Father. Teaching expresses it. All right. So in other words, what we give is what we get. So we give out of the abundance of our heart. Teaching is what expresses that we have this wisdom. Knowledge reveals it. Honor is a crown upon it. Honor is the principle of the tithe. Joy agrees with it. Self-entrainment technique. We reflect the joy and then we're in agreement. That's a contract. His glory has exalted it. Image has revealed it. Rest has received it. Do you want to be a receiver? Do you want to be the perfect law of attraction student? Resting is receiving. Resting in peace, knowing that it's already perfect. His love has embodied it. Okay, love. That's my next book. Okay, that's the embodiment of the principle of Christ. And trust embraces it. So God reveals his hidden self, which is in his Son, so that through the compassion of the Father, the eternal beings may know him and their wearying search of the Father, and rest themselves in him, knowing that this is rest. Okay? After he had filled what was incomplete, he did away with its form. The form of that which was incomplete is the world which it has served. So let's look at this. After he had filled, that was what was incomplete. Now, that's what I did with that mental exercise with the man. I filled it, which means I did away with its form. See how I removed the form from thought. As one's ignorance disappears when one gains knowledge, and as darkness disappears when light appears, so also incompleteness is eliminated by completeness. So incompleteness is the world that is served. And so as we bring our thought into complete awareness of the Father's allness, the incompleteness, which is the law of envy and lack and strife, disappears. Certainly from that moment on, form is no longer manifest, but will be dissolved in fusion with unity. We remove that form in our thought to agree with the Father and rest in his principle. We do that. By means of knowledge, one will purify himself from multiplicity into unity. You see, that's what I did with that, recognizing there was no guy there, and there was no me there. There was only the Father's allness, devouring matter within himself like fire in darkness, by light, death by life. Breaking defective dishes when moving. So these outer forms that are incomplete, they're like defective dishes. The judgment that has come from above and has judged every person, and like a drawn two-edged sword cutting on this side and that. All the spaces were shaken and disturbed, for they had no composure nor stability. Error was disturbed, not knowing what she should do. Okay, so when the truth comes, error gets disturbed. She doesn't know what she's supposed to do. She was troubled, she lamented, she was beside herself because she did not know anything. When knowledge, which is the abolishment of error, approached her with all her emanations, error was empty. The world is an empty carcass, you see? The world is an empty carcass, since there was nothing in her. Truth appeared, all its emanations recognized it. They greeted the Father in truth with a power which is complete and which joins them with the Father. So that's what I mean when I said error will eventually come and serve you. Truth is the mouth of the Father. All the spaces are his emanations. See? There's no person, no evil, and no qualities. What you think you saw, there was no person, there was no good or no evil, and there was no qualities. When morning comes, this one knows that the fear that had been experienced was nothing. Now here's the steps to sin you'll hear me talk about quite a bit. Fear, confusion, lack of confidence, double-mindedness, and division. Create the illusions that we conceive in our thought because of ignorance, and then we become Adam in the dream, fast asleep, and then we find ourselves prey to troubled dreams. That's the story of the prodigal son taking the debts of this world. Now look at this. Either they were fleeing somewhere, or they lacked strength to escape when pursued. They are involved in inflicting blows, or they themselves receive bruises. They are falling from high places, or they fly through the air with no wings at all. Other times it's as if certain people were trying to kill them, even though there is no one pursuing them, or they themselves are killing those beside them, and they are stained by their blood. When they who have experienced all these confusions awaken, they see nothing. Everything you think going on in the world is this right here, right now, what I just said. But when you awaken, you see nothing. Do you understand why I tell you that all the truthers are actually not telling you the truth? This is the truth. Which truth do you want? Do you want the misguided story, or do you want the ultimate truth? They see nothing because the dreams were nothing. It is thus that they who cast ignorance from them like sleep do not consider it to be anything, nor regard its properties to be something real, but they renounce them like a dream in the night, and they consider the knowledge of the Father to be the dawn. And that's what I said in the video about how when you walk in this, it's like you walked into a new day. Happy is the one who comes to himself and awakens. Indeed, blessings on one who has opened the eyes of the blind. The Spirit came to this person in haste when the person was awakened, having given its hand to the one lying prone on the ground, and placed him firmly on his feet, for he had not yet stood up. This gave them the means of knowing the knowledge of the Father and revelation of his Son. So God comes in haste. See that heart? Isn't that great? The Son appeared. Material people, that's your flesh people, including you, were alien to him and did not discern his appearance nor recognize him. What is incorruptible is irresistible. He gave them thought and understanding and mercy and salvation and the spirit of strength derived from the infinity and sweetness of the Father. He caused punishments and scourgings to cease, for it was they that caused many in need of mercy to stray from him in error and in chains, and he mightily destroyed them and derided them with knowledge. He became a path for those who went astray, and knowledge for those who were ignorant, a discovery for those who sought, and a support for those who tremble, a purity for those who were defiled. Who's he? Well, the Son reveals the word of the Father. The Son appeared. Material people were alien. Remove the material people, and the Son appears. Remove the material people, and the Son appears. And then you will have understanding and receive mercy and salvation, and the Spirit will give you the strength. And you'll be purified. Say then in your heart that you are this perfect day, and that in you lives the light that does not fail. And that's good for now. There's a lot more here, but you have to live it. You just have to do it every day and let God guide you all the way. So lastly, this is really cool. The Christian Science hymnal. I read this thing like one every day. This really has about 500 ways of looking at that same mental study, all right? Just look at one, just randomly pick one. We lift our hearts in praise, O God of life, to thee, and would reflect in all our ways thy purity. Thy thoughts our lives enfold, and free us from all fear. All strife is stilled, all grief consoled, for thou art here. We lift our hearts in praise, O God of truth, to thee, and find within thy perfect law our liberty. We bless thy mighty name in this exalted hour, and to the world in faith proclaim thy healing power. We lift our hearts in praise, O God of love, to thee with joy. Did you hear that? We lift our hearts with joy, to find through darkened days thy harmony. O Father, Mother, love, we triumph 'neath thy rod, we glory in thy light, and prove that thou art God. So the whole thing is about lifting our hearts in praise. God is described as life, truth, and love. And we lift our hearts with joy. And it frees us from all fear. Okay? All strife is stilled, grief consoled, and all power back to God brings healing. And then we demonstrate that God is all. See? All right, so this will be like the outtakes, I guess. Let's just do more of it. Let's do more of this practice. So I've, pretty much been in this receiving flow today. And I had a couple individuals come up and knock on my window, and they were part of the condo association of where I'm at, and they had some ideas to share with me. And really those ideas were in relation to something that I've been asking, and I hadn't said anything, but I've got some, like, the universe is bringing it to me now, that's what receiving is. When you listen to a fantastic talk by Mark Schwartz, it's a Christian Science talk, and it's called God's Law of Abundance. And he talks about no good is that good, but which God bestows, and how he stopped making phone calls, stopped using his human will, and just rested. Okay, get it? Rest. He rested on the idea that no good is that good, but which God bestows, and focused on what was coming to him versus what he was pursuing or chasing out there. And, it's an amazing discovery. A lot of people say, well, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that. Well, withdraw human consciousness. So let's go and let's practice it a little bit. Let's withdraw human consciousness in the way that I described so you can get good at this. Okay, so I'll do it on myself again, all right? Because that's where we do all of our work. Let me just show you by example. Is we take everything within thought and we begin to take captive all of those thoughts and purify them, all right? We remove the person so that we can see the face of God. You have to remove the person and the qualities, and all powers have to be given back, taken away from the world. So I am going to think about this feeling that I've been experiencing. Okay, it's not mine, it's just something that is experienced. And it's a feeling of, I guess you'd say, apathy. I don't really want to do anything. I don't really want to create anything. And it comes from a sense of feeling like the world itself is kind of a crappy place. Okay, so I'm just being humble with you, as I'm going to be humble with myself. I made a lot of stops along the way between Wisconsin and Florida, and I noticed that at every gas station, drugs are like the front and centerpiece. There's always like a vape shop, and then there's like 5 CBD stores, and then the centerpiece of all the sales paraphernalia is really just drug paraphernalia. And historically speaking, from my awareness as a human, okay, because the human awareness is that, well, drugs kind of accompany poverty. And why do they show up where poverty is? It's to soothe the pain of the disconnect between man and God, which is the state of poverty. And so drugs are really part of the process. And I saw in every gas station, from here to there, the nicest ones were here. The quick trips here are the nicest of all of them. And then it sort of just declines all the way down. You get through, you go through Chicago, Illinois, you go through Tennessee, you go through Georgia. I stopped at all those places, and bathrooms with no mirrors, they're not kept, they're not clean. The staff is kind of like, not really here to help you, don't really care, just kind of getting through the day. Lots of congestion, lots of people scurrying and hurrying, and junk food everywhere. It's just all junk. It's like a processed, toilet bowl. When you think about it, it smells like a toilet bowl, looks like a toilet bowl, and it's just people offloading all that toilet bowl consciousness food that they were eating while they were traveling. And everybody on the trip, I saw more Dunkin' Donuts than I think I ever want to see again. And I'm not going to lie, I had my share, okay? Because that's just part of being in that dream, all right? But what is that? What is that? It's all to change your state. All of it is to change your state. Looking to escape something. Looking to escape the mortal condition by seeking a false start ghetto. Going into some path that's not going to bring you the ultimate enlightenment. And so, this conclusion that I made was, the world kind of sucks right now. It's just a bunch of crap. It's run by idiots who are very nefarious, and
ignorant from the beginning, of what their ultimate consequence is. They think they have plans of their own, but ultimately the consequence is really far-reaching. And the whole MK Ultra mind control program done over the mass population is not really that cool in my human perspective. How you just traumatize the whole world, then you reset it to a different paradigm so that everybody's used to the idea that they all have to become digital slaves, just like they were tax slaves, and then they were previously physical slaves. Now they're digital slaves. The tech basically has enslaved everyone, and none of that's true. So ultimately what I have to do is I have to go into my consciousness and bring that all captive. And so I'm going to bring it captive, and I'm going to say, right where that space claims to exude that barrenness of, drug paraphernalia, low consciousness, and apathy. I really picked up apathy from the collective. Right where that claims to be, there's only the joy of God. Remember what we just read? The joy of God. So I remove the persons from the scene, so I can imagine, take all the persons out of it. All of the power that I was ascribing, that there is a human will that could lead people into those sort of pitfalls, doesn't exist either. There is no activity of carnality going on there. There's only spirit emanating the fruit. Peace, love, joy, kindness, goodness, faith, love. That's the only thing happening. And then finally, at last, to be set free, I remove myself. The only self that was ever present in that scene was the Christ. And the Christ already has overcome the world of ignorance. It has already called all of its emanations unto itself. And all of its emanations rejoice, because then they are filled with the Word, and the Word brings the life. And so I bring life to all of this in my thought about them. And I know that that's the only truth. And you see, as I purify that, I am also simultaneously purifying the without. As within, so without. And so now this will bring about the newness and reveal the holiness behind the deception of the false appearances of discord and lack and poverty and all these other human appearances. And so what I have to do to receive is I have to remove and withdraw human thought. Human awareness of itself has to be withdrawn, and it has to be put to rest. I need to lay down mortality in order to be the resurrection and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. And so now I have just done that in my own thought. And that's all that is required. The rest is all God's power. I don't have to heal anything. There never was anything to heal. I don't have to try to push against it by making videos and telling the whole world how America's turned into a third world dump. That only makes it more. That only affirms the enemy's position, which is ignorance, trying to use human thought through the vessel of individualized consciousness. I know only one mind, one power, one God, one cause. Nothing was ever disrupted. The perfect dishes have always been in their proper place, and they could never have been defective, and they could not be broken. You see what I'm doing here? Do you see how this works? And this is how we persist in prayer. And prayer is the sight of what never changes. It's not pleading to change something into something better. It's to know that there is nothing to change. It is the perfect creation already. And you see, that's what brings about the dawn. It brings about the new day that I'm talking about. So that's how we do this. You see what I'm doing? This is what you do as you move your vessel through time and space in the dream, is you qualify everything with perfection. See, feel, and be perfection. That's how it's done. You are the light of the world, so that's your activity. That is your consciousness now. So do it and see what transpires, because your world will begin to reflect the goodness of spirit that you are adhering to. You are sticking to the truth. And so therefore the truth will become manifest, and it will be the only reality. All right, so let's do more. Let's just do this. And by the way, I do have an announcement to make, and I'm glad you are still here, because I'll have to announce this more, but I'm going to begin doing our online church services live again. I want to do Wednesdays and Sundays. All right, so I want to go back to the original way that I used to do things. I may or may not continue to do the walk and talks. You know, I've put out a lot of content, and I just really want to change the format and go with engagement and go live again, and really just work individually with people that want to show up, and, you know, create that mastermind effect and start transmitting, you know, breakthrough after breakthrough in that capacity. So we're gonna go live Wednesdays and Sundays. It's going to be the new schedule coming up here, probably starting next week. So I'll probably go live Wednesday, and if you want to do that, you know, let's get you back into the hurtado.io. Get in the Facebook page. Make sure you're there. And what I'll do is I will probably post a Zoom link, all right? And we will meet on Zoom. Okay, now this isn't a, you know, paid class. You don't have to, you don't have to pay to do this. This is ministry, but we're going to conduct ourselves through Zoom, just like we do with the paid classes. And I want you there. I want you to jump on, and you know, you'll get a chance to share your insights for the week. You know, things that are happening with you, just things that God's putting on your heart. You know, be part of this ministry. And I'll have a, you know, like a special sermon each time. I'll have a, you know, something to share in the beginning, and then we'll open it up and we'll talk. And the idea is that I don't want this to be just me talking and hopefully something happens here. I kind of want it to be, let's go over some ideas, let's work with them, and let's do something with them and make some progress, and then let's bring that progress back and let's share it, and let's inspire others to get that same progress in their lives. I think that is a better format. Let's do that. So starting next Wednesday, we'll do that, and we'll do it again on Sunday. Okay? So in the other time, I'll be doing things that I have going on right now. I have new chapters in my life that are opening up, and I'm going to also get busy with the book and the other apps that I'm doing. So all that will come. All right, so let's get busy. I want to do more. I want to get you really situated with this so that you can say, oh, I can totally do this. This is really the ultimate teaching. This is what you want to do. It's all within yourself. The world is in you. The world is in you. It's not out there. Okay, do you see how I'm demonstrating that? We're taking it captive out there, bringing it within, and then purifying it with perfection and qualifying it with perfection, and separating the wheat from the chaff and casting off that which is not ours, that which doesn't belong to us, and holding only the tree of good, God's fruit. That's it. We don't want to mess with the world opinion. We don't need that stuff. So ultimately, we remove all persons, conditions, qualities, and powers that we've ascribed to the world, and that persons includes ourselves. So that's like the last step. We take ourself out of the equation, and then all that is there is the all-seeing I,
the real all-seeing eye of the I am presence, not the counterfeit one that you see on the dollar bill. Is the real one, the one that is the truth, not the anti-truth. So I'll wait for something to show up and then we'll just go with it. Usually driving sets it off because there's almost always somebody that I could get mad at while we're driving. Realistically, driving is one of the best ways to do this. You will find in yourself every little thing that disturbs you about other people as you drive in congested traffic. And if that doesn't work, then, put any of the mainstream media on, and that should help. That should trigger something within you to clean up within yourself. And if that doesn't work, well, you should check your pulse to see if you haven't already yet ascended. So, here we go. The problem, it's not a problem, but I've already created this tranquility space by doing the work now. So, what happens is when you begin doing this, you are touching the garment of the Christ. That's what the real miracle is. And that begins to stay with you. So it's with me right now. All right? But there'll be more. There's always more. But I'm in the place of righteousness, right-brained activity, surrendered state of beingness, receiving because I'm resting. I've withdrawn human consciousness enough so that the scale is tipped in the side of the allowing, or God's allowance has been given to me as the prodigal son returned home. So I'll just go to my memory bank and clean up something that has to be cleaned up, perhaps. What about the idea of the bad weather I said earlier in my video? I said the weather sucks. It's cold. Okay. So first of all, again, I'm looking at it through my own thought now. There is no weather out there. Cold and bitter chill represents the idea of being in a barren place of winter. Okay, so we break it down to what it symbolizes. It symbolizes a barren place of winter. Well, the barren place of winter is not the world that God created, is it? The world that God created is not barren. First of all, it is bountiful and fruitful, and life is always flourishing everywhere God is. So that's the first truth. The second truth is that heat and cold and these sensations belong to a reality that God knows nothing about. They belong to flesh. They belong to ignorance of the Father. There is only the Comforter. Everywhere God's manifest creation is, which means everywhere God is, filling all space, the Comforter is always present. Now there's the second truth. The third truth is that there is only God. There is no man other than God to experience anything outside of God's comfort. So there is no me and God, there is just God. And God is a just God. And you see how I sort that out? Persons, conditions, qualities, and powers. Remove them. Give all that power back to God. Strip the world of all of your attention and the energy that flows thereafter that you've been giving to it as it comes up. That's true forgiveness. Forgiveness is for and give. It means to yield before truth. Yield before the truth and let the allness of spirit be the only thing that you rest your mind upon. All right, so that's enough. I'll let you take over now. See you on the next Wednesday for the live transmission. Make sure you're at hurtado.io, Facebook group for Allow Ministries, and I'll post the Zoom link there. Probably start at 6 p.m. Central Time. See you there.